There is a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It doesn't bleed. It doesn't bruise. It just lives silently. Within you, behind the smile, beneath the rituals, inside the part of you that no one ever really touches. This pain doesn't come from the world, it comes from waking up to it. It comes from the moment you realize that everything you built your identity on was never truly yours. That the things you chased, love, success, recognition, enlightenment, were costumes draped over a soul quietly dying to be seen. Spiritual awakening doesn't begin with bliss. It begins with heartbreak. The kind of heartbreak that splits your reality in half, that dissolves the scaffolding of everything you thought you were, that leaves you standing naked in the mirror of your own consciousness, unable to look away. They never tell you this part. They tell you awakening is light, that it's beautiful, that it's peaceful. But that's not the truth. Not at first, because to awaken is to grieve the years you lived asleep, to grieve the masks you wore to be loved, to grieve the inner child you silenced just to be accepted, to grieve the truth you buried to survive. And this grief, it's sacred, but it hurts. It hurts in ways you can't explain because it doesn't belong to one moment. It belongs to all of them. It belongs to the lifetime of abandonment you committed against your own soul. The 100 quiet ways you said no to yourself just to hear someone else say yes. Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And you didn't avoid it. You turned inward. You walked into the fire. And now you're burning. But you don't know how to heal. Not really. Because this isn't the kind of wound that medicine touches. This is the kind of wound that was never meant to be numbed. It was meant to be transformed. And transformation doesn't happen in one breath. It happens slowly, through the quiet, through the ache, through the unlearning of everything you thought healing would look like. You don't heal by escaping the pain of your awakening. You heal by understanding it. And so the question isn't, how do I stop this pain? The question is, what is this pain trying to teach me? Because pain is a voice. And if you listen closely enough, it speaks with incredible clarity. It says, you are no longer allowed to betray yourself and call it love. You are no longer allowed to abandon your truth for belonging. You are no longer allowed to shrink just to be held. This pain is not here to punish you. It is here to return you to your center, to your power, to your wholeness. But returning isn't gentle. Returning means breaking open the places you sealed shut. It means letting the numbness wear off. It means pulling your identity out of the fire and seeing what remains. This is the kind of healing that does not advertise itself. It doesn't look like yoga poses and candles and mantras etched in gold. It looks like weeping on the floor at midnight. It looks like choosing solitude when you crave distraction. It looks like whispering, "I forgive you," to the mirror, even when you're not sure you believe it yet. Because this pain behind your awakening, it holds a secret. It is not the end. It is the door, the threshold between the false you and the real you. The version of you the world molded and the version of you that was buried alive beneath the weight of expectation. And as you pass through that door, something shifts. You stop asking to be saved. You start learning how to save yourself. Not by fixing your broken parts, but by realizing they were never broken, just exiled. And so healing begins, not as a rush of answers, but as a return to presence, to the present moment, to the forgotten body, to the breath you used to ignore, because the pain of awakening is not mental. It is cellular. It lives in the nervous system. In the shoulders you learn to tighten. In the stomach you learn to clench. In the jaw you learn to silence. In the heart you taught to shut down. And your healing, it begins where the pain lives in the body. In the subtle, in the slow, in the still. This is the wisdom Jung pointed us toward, that the unconscious lives not just in dreams, but in flesh. That healing is not thinking differently. It's becoming whole. And wholeness is a reunion, not a performance. You do not become whole by pretending to be healed. You become whole by allowing every part of you, even the trembling, even the angry, even the ashamed, to come back into the light. That is what this pain is asking for. Inclusion, compassion, homecoming, not judgment, not exile, not more spiritual bypassing. And so, if you want to heal the pain behind your awakening, you must stop trying to be spiritual and start trying to be honest. Honest about the rage you buried under your peace. Honest about the grief hiding beneath your wisdom. Honest about the loneliness that still lives inside your strength. Because that is where your soul lives now. In the honesty. And when you touch it, when you speak it, the pain begins to soften. Not disappear, but soften. Like winter slowly melting into spring. Like frost giving way to soil, like silence beginning to breathe again. And from that soil, something will grow. Not a new identity, not a performance, but a truth that feels like home. Healing doesn't happen when you feel ready. It happens when your soul decides it's time to return, not to who you were, but to who you forgot. You don't get to schedule it. You don't get to force it. You don't get to bypass the ache by calling it divine. You meet it as it is, with eyes open, with breath trembling, with no armor left. And that meeting is where the sacred work begins. This is not a healing you perform for others to applaud. It's not something you can capture in a before and after picture. It's not something you share in captions. It's quiet, messy, unseen, and yet it changes everything. Because true healing doesn't make you more impressive. It makes you more honest. It strips away everything that was performative, even the way you once performed healing. It exposes every place you used wisdom as a mask. Every place you used calmness as a way to avoid anger. Every place you used forgiveness as a way to avoid feeling your pain. And in that exposure, you begin to feel human again. Not elevated, not enlightened, but human in the most divine sense of the word. To be fully human is not a limitation. It is a sacred achievement, because the ego doesn't want to be human. It wants to be special, superior, impressive. But the soul longs for wholeness, and wholeness means including everything you once rejected, including the pain that brought you here. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And your darkness is not just shadow. It is sorrow. It is longing. It is all the unmet needs that spiritual bypassing tried to erase with mantras and vision boards. But you cannot heal by escaping into light. You heal by walking back into your body, the one that held all your unlived truths. You heal by listening to the grief that doesn't care how spiritual you sound. You heal by letting the inner child scream what the adult version of you learned to suppress. You heal by becoming whole enough to hold contradiction, to cry and feel strong, to grieve and feel grounded, to be scared and still move forward, to feel broken and still belong. This is not about arriving. This is about allowing. Allowing yourself to stop pretending that awakening made you invincible. Allowing yourself to admit that clarity sometimes feels like emptiness. Allowing yourself to sit with the rawness not as a problem to solve, but as a presence to meet. Because something lives in that rawness. Something alive. Something ancient. Something you silenced every time you faked being fine. And when you finally meet it not with shame, not with avoidance, but with reverence, you realize you are not just healing the pain from your awakening. You are healing the pain that was always there. The awakening simply revealed it. The emptiness, the heartbreak, the loss of identity, none of it is new. It was buried, encoded, passed down from your childhood, from your ancestors, from the collective stories you inherited about what it means to be worthy. And now, you are breaking the spell. You are standing in the center of your own psychic storm and saying, "I will no longer abandon myself." Not to be liked, not to be understood, not even to be healed faster. Because true healing is not about speed. It is about depth. It is about becoming so rooted in your own truth that even the emptiness becomes a friend, a teacher, a holy space. And in that space, you stop trying to become someone new. You start remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. And that remembering it doesn't always feel like joy. Sometimes it feels like rage. Sometimes it feels like grief. Sometimes it feels like nothing at all. And still you remain. You keep breathing. You keep softening. You keep showing up, not to fix the pain, but to love the one in pain. That is how the healing begins. Not in the story, not in the theory, but in the body, in the breath. In the moment you stop performing and start witnessing yourself fully. You stop asking, when will this be over? And you start asking, what is this teaching me? And the answers are subtle, but they are there. In the way your shoulders begin to lower, in the way your breath begins to deepen, in the way your voice starts to tremble because it's finally real again. And maybe, for the first time in your life, you realize you are not your pain. You are the one who can hold it. You are not your story. You are the space it unfolds within. You are not the wound. You are the healer that was born from it. And that is the beginning of a healing that never ends, not because it's incomplete, but because it's alive. Healing, you learn, is not a finish line. It is a rhythm, a spiral, a sacred unraveling and remembering again and again. Just when you think you've reached the center, another layer appears. Not to punish you, but to reveal you, to call you even closer to the core of your humanity, the place where your scars stop being secrets and start becoming symbols. Because pain is not meant to make you suffer forever. It is meant to make you conscious, conscious of the patterns you inherited, conscious of the stories you absorbed, conscious of the agreements you made with silence just to survive. And now here you are, awake and hurting. Not because you're broken, but because you are finally feeling what the old version of you wasn't strong enough to hold. That's what no one tells you about healing. It takes strength to hurt, honestly. Not the strength to hide it. Not the strength to distract from it. But the strength to let it move through you. To let it soften you without swallowing you. To let it change you without defining you. This is where true spiritual maturity begins. Not in how much you know, but in how gently you can hold what still feels like chaos. You begin to realize the pain behind your awakening is not something to push through, it's something to befriend. Not all at once, not in some grand cinematic moment of transcendence, but slowly, softly, honestly. You wake up one morning and notice you're not afraid of your own sadness anymore. You no longer rush to escape your anger. You no longer numb your loneliness with empty connections. You let these parts of you exist. You let them speak, and in doing so, you become whole. Not healed, whole. Carl Jung taught us that the goal of the individuation process, the spiritual maturation of the psyche, is not perfection, but wholeness. It's the integration of all that has been split apart inside you, the light and the shadow, the child and the adult, the rage and the forgiveness, the masculine and the feminine, the divine and the deeply human. And when they begin to meet, not in theory, but in your lived experience, something shifts. You stop trying to become enlightened. You start becoming real. You begin to trust the intelligence of your own healing. You start to understand that pain isn't the opposite of progress, it is progress. Because every time you hold the ache instead of abandoning yourself, you reclaim a part of your soul. Every time you breathe through the emptiness instead of filling it with noise, you make space for the sacred. Every time you say, "This hurts, but I will stay," you become someone who is no longer afraid of the dark. And that is power. Not the kind you use to control others, but the kind that makes you unshakable in a world built on illusion. Because now you don't run from the void. You sit inside it. You light a candle there. You call it home. And people will notice, not because you're louder, but because you're deeper. Your presence changes. You no longer need to explain yourself. You no longer need to be understood. You no longer negotiate your worth. You walk into rooms differently. You take up space without apology. You say no without guilt. You speak your truth not for validation, but for alignment. Because healing has made you honest, and honesty has made you free. And you'll still hurt. You'll still cry. You'll still lose people who can't meet you here. But you won't lose yourself anymore. And that is the greatest healing of all. Not that the world changed. Not that the pain disappeared. But that you finally stopped abandoning the one thing that matters most. The self beneath the story. The self that was never broken. Only buried. Only silenced. Only waiting for your permission to return. And now that it has returned, everything feels different. Not easier, not simpler, but truer. And that truth, however raw, however imperfect, becomes your path. You don't need to see the whole way forward. You only need to take the next honest step. To say the thing you've been avoiding. To rest when the world tells you to produce. To feel when your instincts scream to shut down. To trust that this pain has a purpose even if you can't name it yet. Because the pain behind your awakening isn't just about what's breaking. It's about what's trying to be born. What's trying to be born is not a new identity. It's not a shinier version of you. It's not someone better or more enlightened or more liked. What's being born is the self, the true self, the whole self, the unfiltered, unpolished, unprotected you, the one that doesn't perform, the one that doesn't beg, the one that doesn't hustle for healing, the one that remembers silence, the one that knows the difference between peace and avoidance, the one that doesn't need to transcend pain because it knows pain is not the enemy. Disconnection is, and now you are reconnected to your grief, to your body, to your knowing, to your God not as a being in the sky, but as the quiet pulse inside your chest that never stopped beating even when you couldn't hear it. You don't need to be told you're healing. You feel it not as ecstasy, but as embodiment. You walk slower. You breathe deeper. You answer texts less quickly. You cry when the tears rise without apology. You smile when the joy returns without needing a reason. You have become sovereign in your soul. This is what the pain was leading you to. Not power over life, but participation with it. Not certainty, but trust. Not perfection, but presence. You finally stopped trying to get back to who you were before the pain. Because now you see it clearly. That version of you was not whole. That version of you was not free. That version of you was built on survival. But this version is born from truth. And truth does not shout. It does not demand. It does not chase. It just is. And it's in you now. In the way you hold space for yourself. In the way you no longer apologize for your sensitivity. In the way you protect your peace not with walls, but with discernment. In the way you forgive without forgetting who you are. In the way you stand quietly rooted in the aftermath of your own soul quake and choose to grow anyway. Because healing, real healing, is not about fixing what hurt you. It's about reclaiming the one who was hurt. Calling them home, listening to them, holding them, loving them with a ferocity that says, you don't have to disappear anymore. You don't have to hide your ache. You're allowed to be here exactly as you are. And when that happens, when your healing becomes an act of inclusion instead of erasure, the pain transforms. It no longer owns you. It no longer defines you. It simply becomes part of your mosaic. Not a chapter to skip, but a thread in the tapestry of your soul. A thread that says I was here. I burned. I broke. I felt it all. And I stayed. That is what makes you real. Not your achievements, not your answers, not your spiritual language. Your presence, your willingness to remain, your devotion to the raw truth of your experience. That is healing. Not as a destination, but as a way of being. And now, that way is open. You don't need to fight to be whole. You're already whole in all your grief, your softness, your becoming. You don't need to earn your place in this world. Your breath is proof that you belong. You don't need to run from your pain anymore. It's not here to destroy you. It's here to open you. So let it. Let the ache be sacred. Let the silence be holy. Let the slow return to self be enough. Because it is. You are. You always were.